Hi, everyone. This is Lead with Who You Are, and I'm Dia Bondi. On this show, we explore and discover what it truly means to lead with who you are, and we're doing it with people who embody just that. In this episode, we're talking with Soraya Chemaly about her book, Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger. In this episode, Soraya says anger is information and a way for us to be creative, true, and healthy. And she talks a lot about how we can lead with a new understanding of rage and anger in our homes, lives, and workplaces. Listen in. Hey, just a quick reminder. You can subscribe to this show on your podcast platform of choice. We're live nearly everywhere, and you can always listen to the show at diabondi.com. If there's a leader or innovator in your life who is at their shiniest when they lead with who they truly are, please share the show with them and rate, subscribe, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference in the reach that the show has when you let everyone else know what you love about the show. Thanks so much. Soraya Chemaly is an award-winning author and activist. She writes and speaks frequently on topics related to gender norms, inclusivity, social justice, free speech, sexualized violence, and technology. The former executive director of the Representation Project and director and co-founder of the Women's Media Center Speech Project, she has long been committed to expanding women's civic and political participation. She's the author of Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger, which was recognized as a best book of 2018 by The Washington Post, Fast Company, Psychology Today, and NPR, which is what we'll be talking about today. She's a contributor to several anthologies, most recently Free Speech in the Digital Age and Believe Me, How Trusting Women Can Change the World. Soraya currently serves on the national board of the Women's Media Center and is a former board member of Emerge America, Women, Action, and the Media, and the DC Volunteer Lawyers Project, and has served on the advisory council of many other organizations in social justice and media. In 2013, Soraya won the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communications Award for Feminist Advocacy and the Secular Women Activism Award. In 2014, she was named one of Elle Magazine's 25 Inspiring Women to Follow on Social Media. And in 2019, she was awarded the Feminist Press Feminist Power Award. Hello, Soraya. It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you too.
I want to say, one, thank you so much for being with me today. And I want to set this up a little bit for us and for folks that might be listening. So here goes. So, I'm having you on the podcast today to talk about and discuss rage, how it works, how we can understand it in a new way, and how we can lead with it with that new understanding. Mm-hmm. So your book, Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger, hit real hard for me. Because of both the collective experience of rage and the research that you talk about women's collective as well as individual experience around rage and anger, the cultural implications of the shitty way that we relate to it in our culture and deal with it, but also because of my own personal experience with it. Mm-hmm. And I got your book when you and I both actually spoke at the same 3% Movement conference a handful of years ago. And
yes, that's right.
I sat in the audience and I picked up your book on the way out the door at the 3% store. And I just, for me, the reframing of anger, as from a liability to an asset was super powerful. I mean, that's my language, not yours.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But being, sort of constructively looking at how we can use anger and rage and direct it at something to make it productive and work for us instead of it being something needs to be gotten rid of, smoked out, annihilated. So to start, why, in your view, do we need to claim, or might we want to claim, anger and rage and let it be a full citizen in our lexicon of emotions and dialogue, and specifically for women?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, one of the reasons I wrote this particular book when I did was because it was so clear to me that there were many reasons why women in their broad diversity and their many feminisms have to be angry. But that anger was just not respected anywhere. It wasn't respected at home. It wasn't respected at work. It wasn't respected in the political world. Wasn't really respected in media. And it was at a time in 2016 when male anger was everywhere and very respected, whether that was in the way that it characterized certain political populism or in the way that political candidates could express themselves over and over again. There was this quality of men being taken seriously and listened to, and women being mocked and dismissed. That was one. The second reason, though, is because I didn't have a resource like this in my own life, and I had come to the conclusion in my 40s that my inability to understand anger at all was making me sick. It literally was hurting me. And it took me a long time to realize what that was and why it was happening. And I didn't want other women, and I didn't want girls in particular, to be left ignorant in the way that I was. I just looked back at my life and I thought, wow, no one ever said anything. No one talked about it. Nobody shared information. The whole idea behind my anger was that it should go away
Yes.
and that I should keep it to myself. And it didn't really matter what the costs of that were to me or relationships or the political world that I'm part of. I really felt that my ability to feel my anger and understand it was like returning to myself. It was like I had hidden myself from myself. And I remembered what it felt like to actually be a person that had these feelings and that those feelings were very important, you know. And and the point to me about rage is by the time you have gotten to rage, it's already dysfunctional. It's already been ignored. It's already not working. By the time someone explodes like that, so much has already happened that has gone unaddressed. And the point is to never get to that point.
Right. In that way, I walk with the possibility of having a rage all the time, but it's not inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
There's a distinction to me between rage and anger
Right.
that if I am good at understanding and incorporating, letting be present the angers that I have about something and to be able to let them be here, they don't have to push me into a rage.
Right. That's the goal. I mean, if you think, what am I feeling? Oh, you know what? I'm not tired. I'm not stressed. I'm really angry. Why am I angry? I'm angry because I feel taken for granted of. I'm angry because I feel like there's no reciprocation in this exchange that I'm in. Whatever the reason is, then you can do something about it,
Exactly.
you know? But because we're socialized instead to ignore it, to repress it, to suppress it, to divert it, to distort it, we don't get that information. We just can't even come to that conclusion because we're really taught that to have needs of our own and have those needs prioritized is it makes us bad people, right? That's the message girls get.
Yes. And there's this interesting relanguaging of like, you're not angry, you're just frustrated. You're not angry, you're just
Yeah,
tired. You're not angry, you're just
that's right.
hungry.
Anything.
Anything.
Yeah. You're not angry, you're sick.
Exactly. Understanding completely that for me, when I do a good job of being able to understand my anger, I recognize that when I am tired, when I am hungry, when I am overstretched, when I am saying yes to things I really need to be saying no thank you to, those things that create a primer for a rage because my anger, like, then it's like a second set of risks that get put into the mix.
What I think happens, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I think it addresses what you were saying, is that so many people they don't even have that point. They literally don't even know they're angry. So they can't have the combination of feelings that you might have or or consciously think or unconsciously think I should be doing X or Y, they literally stop being able to feel the emotion. They don't know what it feels like in their bodies. They don't have a language to address what is going through their heads.
We're talking about this at a very individual level right now,
Right,
but our collective experience is a collection of individual experiences. So for me, I lived with it for 30 years before I did a thing,
right,
thinking all the while that I needed to fix, that it was a broken thing in me that I needed to fix. And
right,
so I
right.
spend all of my life and time trying to figure out how to not have them, to prevent them, without actually experiencing the feelings that if I let myself experience them, it would in fact prevent it. Do you know what I mean? It was like fear
Hmm.
was
Yeah.
fear was rage, anger and rage was death. If I actually feel it, a couple times it felt existential enough that if I feel this instead of express a rage, I will actually die. Like it was physically painful
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
like a panic attack,
Totally.
right? It's like I feel like I'm going to die. But if you have really been taught that you're going to be punished, which is the case, right? If you've been taught you're going to be punished for expressing anger or a sense of injustice or wrongness in your personal life or in the world, those are powerful lessons. I mean, I don't know how you grew up. I grew up in a Catholic church, which I promptly fled from. But, I mean, that those are incompatible. You can't, anger is simply not anything remotely like a virtue in certain traditions, certainly not for women.
Yet you started this conversation saying that at the time when you wrote this book, you were recognizing how much men in our society were rewarded. Maybe that wasn't the word you used.
No, I did say rewarded. They are rewarded. And that's the interesting thing, right? Because I think if you ask men, they too will say, well, anger's not good. But that doesn't mean they aren't rewarded for having it, right? That's different. They may like there's a time like for men, the idea of justified rage or justifiable anger is part of the patriarchal legacy. It's how you exert your authority. It's how you prove your leadership. It's what good fathers do. They love, but they're also firm, and they're like you can go through all the stories, any story you want. There's always an incident of anger.
There's a whole mythology around that. Yes.
There's a whole thing, and so I think our experiences as women are very different. If you're a black woman, your experience with anger is very different from if you are like an ethnically ambiguous brown woman like me, or a white woman, or a woman of Asian descent. Like there are so many ways in which our stereotypes and our cultural norms construct anger for us and impose rules on us. Um, but still, in the aggregate, in the United States, white men have the benefit of anger. Black men don't. Like black men, if they demonstrate anger, they could very well end up dead or in jail. When Obama was president, there was a whole comedy routine that went on for 4 years based on the idea that he needed an anger translator. I don't know if you ever saw the Key and Peele skit, but the whole skit was that the man who was Obama would say something, very benign and dignified, and then his anger translator would say what he really
And
meant.
that's when we would finally
And
listen.
and that's when and so I think it's just important. I think people just think that feelings are inside us and we have them and they're private, and nothing could be further from the truth.
You talked a little bit earlier about sort of the somatic experience of feeling these things in your body. And I remember the first time I actually experienced a rage. It wasn't yet anger, it was still a rage, but I didn't actually express a rage. I didn't actually have a rage, but I had a rage. I was at home alone. I knew it was coming on, and it was like that scene in what's that film in The Neverending Story, where the nothing, the great nothing is coming and just eating all the land. I could feel it
Big
coming
cloud.
moving toward me. And I wanted to not actually have a rage. And so I just sat in a chair and let it hit me. I just let it hit me. And then 3 minutes later, I wasn't dead. And
Right.
and it dissipated, like it had this peak experience without actually doing anything. And I felt it instead of acting it. And that was the beginning of really understanding how it behaved in my body, what it would do, and how I could both invite it and not feel threatened by it because I knew it wouldn't kill me. And I started to become less scared of my own feelings of rage, and then started to be able to distinguish the difference between that and anger. And so I'm curious, for women that you've maybe interviewed over, because I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, who've
Hmm.
who've been having conversations about it for as long as you have. As you did your research and talked to other women, like, how do other women start to feel it and have it not?
Well, I mean, I think, again, to go back to this idea that people lose the ability to feel it, I would say that the somatic experience of rage is often not an aware one.
Yes.
It's the experience of having rage act on your body and make you sick, right? I mean, take teenage girls. I will take two times in women's lives, two times of great transition, adolescence and menopause. In the culture that we live in, when we think of teenage girls and menopausal women, the first thoughts we have are hormones are going to make them crazy. They're not going to be themselves. They're going to be filled with rage, or they're going to be unpleasant, or, any number, she's crazy, she's lost her mind, whatever. But if you really think about it, during those very pivotal times, bodies are changing, um, relationships are changing. And when I say bodies are changing, I mean by that women's own sense of their bodies, of their selves, because your body is yourself, is being altered in real time. Like, you can wake up one morning and look down and be like, well, what the hell are these on my chest? They weren't there yesterday, right? And all of a sudden now they are, and so we don't take any of it seriously. We don't take seriously what's happening during those periods, which can be significant. And instead, we minimize it and then also expect people to somehow be happy about it all, right? And
Yeah.
in
Oh, look
fact,
at
why?
you.
Oh, look at
Yes.
you. And adolescent girls are not only are they losing their childhood, but they are acutely aware of the vulnerabilities that looking like women comes with, right? They're sad. They're grieving a lot of them. They're confused. Some of them are excited, but it's a complex cocktail of very potent feelings. And they're really angry. And so we see spikes in anxiety, depression, self harm, eating disorders, all of these self harming behaviors and experiences that are joined by the quality of suppressed and repressed rage, of anger that doesn't go addressed. And that's not to say that it's directly causal, right? It's not like, I'm really angry, I think I'll develop an eating disorder. That's just not how things work. But they are very strongly correlated. But instead of maybe saying to a 13, 14-year-old girl, what is making you angry? Let's talk about it. We'd much rather pathologize them and say, oh my God, she has a eating disorder. Let's send her off to some clinic for 3 months, so she can learn how to change her behavior. And that's terrible, right? Like, that's just a horrible way
So we're already
to,
disallowing anger already.
well, we're disallowing it. And what we're basically saying is we would rather that you be sick and hurt yourself than as a society deal with what you are want to say, right? Like, the level of self-silencing that goes into girls' adolescence is really staggering. I think women know this, even if they don't admit it. I don't think fathers know it for the most part. It's very radically different from most men's experiences. Again, I think black men in America have a different experience, but still, I would say that for young men reaching adolescence is being able to look forward to freedom. And that's true for girls and women too, but not in the same way. It's just not. A lot of girls and women experience adolescence and adulthood, always hand in hand with the sense of their physical vulnerability.
So you mentioned sort of this common story of a girl having rage and or anger, having that show, we pathologize it, we want her to exit stage left to go get fixed. I want to talk a little bit about the myths that we have around anger, the stories we tell about what anger is.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, I've shared a little bit with some people about my journey with it. And I hear these phrases all the time. Oh, you just need to get it out, or you just need to punch a pillow.
Yeah.
Like it's I don't know, like it's a hairball we're supposed to hack up and then clean up and walk away. And then it's also, there's some fixed amount of it that needs to be removed
Mm-hmm. And
and
exhausted.
exhausted. Yes. What are some of the other sort of stories we tell or myths, things that we
Well,
hear?
I mean, I think a couple of things. One is people believe men are angrier because, quote unquote, testosterone, which is bullshit, right? Like, that's just not the case. Women report higher levels of anger, more sustained anger. It just looks different for all the reasons we just discussed. Secondly, testosterone doesn't make people angry. It's related to aggression, but it turns out that that's a two-way street. If you behave physically in certain ways, if you exert dominance over someone else, like firing them, the levels of testosterone in your body go up. For a man, they go up maybe like by a factor of 4. For a woman, they go up a factor of 10, right? So the relationship between aggression and testosterone is a really interesting one, particularly if you think of the way we socialize children to play. So people are much more likely to allow boys to engage in physical fighting, in rough and tumble behavior, in exploring wilderness, in venturing farther away from them in a playground. Like, there are all these fascinating playground studies. But all of those physical behaviors increase testosterone in the body, regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl engaged in them, right? So, in fact, the way we think of gendered play also has an impact on our hormones as opposed to the other way around. That was a really interesting thing to consider in terms of anger. We also believe that women are more likely to be sad, which is just how we characterize their anger. If you see a baby and you think that baby's very disagreeable and tetchy, and people think it's a boy because it's dressed in blue, right? They'll describe the baby as angry and difficult and aggressive. The exact same baby doing the exact same thing as a girl, they'll describe it as sad and anxious and in need of some back patting or something. There's no difference in their behavior at all. It's just the difference in the way people want to attribute those emotions.
Yes, and these myths can be so destructive because they let us off the hook for actually holding space for the real emotion, don't they?
Yeah, and yeah, they do. But I would also argue that, we incorporate these ideas into ourselves. So I write, for example, about women who cry when they're angry. I used to cry when I was angry, and I didn't even know why. I didn't even want to cry, right? But in fact, if you're a child who learns not to be angry and you learn that people will listen to you if you cry, then you learn to cry and that's a really early childhood lesson, right? Like, we actually have a tendency to breed anxious behaviors into girls, right? Oh, you fell and skinned your knee. Come here. Are you all right? Like that whole thing,
Yes.
right? But in fact, when you're an adult woman, you don't want to cry when you're angry.
No, I want to break shit when I'm angry.
Right. But in a heterosexual relationship, it's often the case that because a woman doesn't want to break the relationship, they won't show anger. Instead, they'll display sadness or fear because they correctly assume that the man they are with will dislike the anger. And studies show that that's true. Men in heterosexual relationships, when they see anger in their spouse, their response isn't to say, oh, I should listen to why she's angry, or what can I do to help her change the circumstances that are making her angry. Their response is tone policing. It is to get angry, that she's expressing anger.
So as we think about our own experience of anger and rage, recognizing what it costs folks, in our culture, and developing our own understanding and relationship and competence around our own anger and rage. For me, like getting into understanding of my own rage and becoming sort of competent in it has been super instrumental in bringing me closer to who I actually am,
Mm-hmm.
because it forces me to look at what actually matters to me and where the transgressions are and what I'm about. And I can actually lead with it now instead of gaming everything on my chessboard of life on how to rid myself of it and my life of it. It's actually part of leading with who I am. I've said, like, okay, you get to be here. So for you, what does it mean for you to lead with who you are, knowing you've had your own relationship with anger and rage?
I think for me, the most important thing is to enable other women to experience what you and I have experienced, right? Like it's really a liberation. And to me, it's just very important that we understand that our anger is information, as Audre Lorde said, that it is a way for us to bridge communities. It's a way to find like minded people. It's a way to be creative. It's a way to be true to yourself. It's a way to be healthy. It's a way to have more intimacy. My God, if you can't say what you need to the people you love, you are not in an intimate relationship, right? Like if you fear that the people you love the most don't care enough to listen to you say what you need, then there's a problem. And the anger gives you a way to address the problem and solve the problem, you know?
You said earlier you're a bit of a pessimist right now. Is there one thing you're optimistic about right now?
Yeah, the thing I'm optimistic about is that I think, well, first of all, more young people came out in the midterms to vote than ever before. I'm super excited by Gen Z. They're getting increasingly politically active, and I'm writing a book about resilience myths. And a lot of people seem to really believe that young people have a lot of hopelessness and despair. If they record high levels of anxiety or depression, I would argue that it's because they have the language and the wherewithal to recognize those things, and to talk about them in ways that prior generations were far less inclined to. So those are some of the things that give me hope.
Soraya, thank you so much for being with me today.
No, thank you for inviting me today. It was delightful to talk to you.
Where can people find you, and what can they do outside of buying the book?
Well, thank you. They can find me on Twitter as long as it's still there. Um, every day is a mystery on Twitter, right? I am on Twitter. I also have a Rage Becomes You account on Instagram, and a writer's page on Facebook.
Soraya, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lead with Who You Are is a production of Dia Bondi Communications. Scored, mixed, and produced by Arthur Leon Adams III, and executive produced by Mandy Miranda. You can reach out to us at hello@diabondi.com or leave us a voicemail at 341-333-2997. You can like, rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Go to diabondi.com for show notes and to learn about all it is that we do to help you speak powerfully and lead with who you are.